Hello and welcome to Mind, Body, Sleep, the podcast for anyone out there who wants to understand and recover from insomnia using a holistic perspective. I'm Beth Kendall, your host. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I am going to dive in right away today because we've got a lot to talk about. This is actually going to be a very foundational episode that will build on one of the core philosophies I shared way back in episode 1, which is titled Redefining Insomnia. So if you want to go back and listen to that, it could be a helpful sidekick to this episode. So let me break down the direction of our topic on effortlessness. First, I'm going to cover the concept of effortlessness as a whole, because this is something that fascinates me more and more as time goes on. And with that, I'm going to share a principle around effortlessness to help illustrate what I'm going to talk about next, which is sleep efforts. Sleep efforts are an integral part of the insomnia experience because without them, we probably wouldn't have insomnia. So we're going to cover what they are, why they matter, and what you need to know going forward. Lastly, I'm going to share my wish for you and how effortlessness ties into the greater mission of the work I currently do in the world. So what is effortlessness? Well, if you were to look it up in the dictionary, effortlessness is defined as requiring no physical or mental exertion. That sounds pretty good to me and likely captures what many of you listening are probably seeking with your sleep. And this goes along with my core philosophy, which is that sleep by nature is a passive process. It's something that happens versus something we do. Now, there's something called the law of reversed effort. And this law says that the harder we try to achieve an outcome, the less likely we are to achieve that outcome. And I don't think there's anything that represents this law better than sleep. And this is not to be confused with another well-known theory, which is called the law of least effort, which also very much applies to sleep because it's based on the fact that nature will always take the path of least resistance. And of course, as a holistic sleep coach, I view the human species as a part of the natural world. So this applies to us as well. Grass doesn't try to grow. It just grows, right? Fish don't try to swim. They just swim. It's the same with sleep. It's a biological function that doesn't really require much of anything from us beyond its opposite, which is wakefulness. So as long as you've been awake for a long enough period of time, you have checked the only box you need for sleep. Okay, so getting back to the law of reversed effect. So many laws and theories, but I like them because they provide a framework for my thoughts. In recent years, I've considered this principle quite a lot from a creative development standpoint because I'm fascinated with how it ties into the concept of flow or the flow state. And you've probably heard me talk about how sleep comes in the flow, right? It comes when we're not trying to force it or control it. But the concept of flow can be tied to life in so many ways. I've had a few flow state experiences. Writing my free course was one of them. I sat down to write my free course, which is a pretty lengthy course with 9 emails, and it came out without much effort from me at all, which honestly was a little bizarre because that definitely is not always the case. But you see this with artists and musicians as well. Well, anything in life really. But when the movement or the music comes through the person, it's like there's a greater intelligence playing a part in the experience. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about that Michael Jackson Thriller documentary I watched, and he said that he felt bad even taking credit for that album because whatever he put into it came through him versus from him. In the flow state, our actions become fluent. The painter becomes the painting. The musician becomes the music. But the law of reversed effort can be experienced in the simplest of ways. How often is it hard to think of the word you want to say and it doesn't come to you, no matter how hard you're trying to think of it? But then when you get back into the flow of life and there's no more effort put into trying to remember that word, of course, it's suddenly available to you. And then you have to text your friend or your mom and say, well, I thought of that word, by the way. But it's precisely because we're not trying. So let's move on to our next topic, which is the topic of sleep efforts. So what is a sleep effort? A sleep effort is anything we do with the intention of producing or protecting sleep. So this can be things you add to sleep, like eye shades, meditations, valerian root tea, blackout shades, nighttime rituals, breathing exercises, a noisemaker, a bath, blue blocker glasses. I think you get the picture. Or this can be things you take away or remove to sleep. So things like stopping coffee or wine, removing screens at night, not taking trips anymore, kicking the animals or your partner out of bed, not committing to things. Sometimes I refer to sleep efforts as safety behaviors because it can also be things like staying in bed for long periods of time, hoping to get a few hours, or sleeping on the couch to get some sleep. So why do these sleep efforts matter? What's the big deal if I drink sleepy time tea or love my noisemaker? Well, the truth is sleep efforts don't really matter as much as the intention driving them. Let's quickly explore the path to sleep efforts from the insomnia perspective. Typically, there is some sort of initial event that disrupts our sleep, right? Our sleep gets rattled in some way. A little seed of doubt gets planted in the mind about our own ability to sleep. And as a result of that, our relationship with sleep starts to change. Sleep goes from being a natural biological function that you probably never thought too much about to a problem that needs to be solved and conquered. So this is when the efforting usually begins. Maybe you start with something simple like taking melatonin or cutting out coffee. And then, God forbid, these measures actually work, because that's when we start pegging our sleep onto outside influences. But then when those initial external measures stop working, then we start adding more and more things into the mix until over time we develop a belief system centered on the idea that sleep is achieved through sources outside ourselves. And we're always looking for that next magical thing that's going to help us sleep. But here's the thing, you guys, and hopefully one of the big takeaways from this podcast, it is always your own body that generates sleep. It can seem very convincing that it's all of these other things doing the job, and they may help temporarily, but that's more because we're outsourcing our worry and our stress onto the thing. And it's in the absence of that struggle and worry that sleep has the space to come. We think, oh, thank heavens, I don't have to worry about not sleeping anymore. This supplement has got me. So then, of course, we sleep. And it's a wonderful relief. But then if hyperarousal gets high again and we think the thing has stopped working, when it's really just the root cause of insomnia coming through. And this is how we stay on the hamster wheel of fixing sleep that isn't really fixing anything. So understanding sleep efforts is important because they can reinforce the fear of not sleeping and teach the brain that we've got to do all of these things in order to sleep. What does that mean going forward? Do we have to get rid of all of these sleep efforts in order to recover? And the answer to that is no, you definitely do not. A lot of people come into my program, and when they understand this part of things clearly, they're just done with all the sleep efforts. Okay, they never really wanted to be doing all the rituals and routines, and maybe they never did these things prior to insomnia. So it's a big relief to let them go, and they feel really liberated. Other people aren't quite ready to give up sleep efforts, and that is also very okay. Remember, suffering is not required to recover from insomnia. You guys have already been through enough. You don't need to worry about stopping any sleep efforts unless you want to. There are, however, a couple of things I'd like to offer going forward that I think will be helpful on the recovery path. What I see happen sometimes with this understanding of sleep efforts is that the fear of not sleeping can turn into a fear of doing sleep efforts. So we start to think that sleep hinges on whether we're engaging in a sleep effort or not. Now, remember, the only thing you need for sleep is sleep drive. That's the only requirement. And most of the people I know with insomnia have plenty of sleep drive. So you're good. But we can be so deep into the fixing orientation that we get a little tangled up with this sleep effort understanding because maybe there's this sense that we're going to be docked some sleep or punished in some way if we do a sleep effort. But that is not the case. You don't need to do anything to deserve sleep. You can just have it exactly as you are, just by virtue of being human. Once you understand that sleep efforts aren't the thing that makes you sleep, it doesn't really matter so much if you do them or not. And honestly, just being aware or having an awareness of a sleep effort already takes away a lot of the power from the sleep effort. And there's usually a period of time where you hold these two truths at the same time, meaning you consciously know that the sleep effort isn't really what makes you sleep, but subconsciously your faith is still in the sleep effort. And this too is okay, my friends. It's called making the placebo effect work for you, which is one of my all-time favorite subjects. I should probably do a podcast on just that. The other thing I wanted to mention about sleep efforts is that a lot of times people ask me, well, how do I know if this is a sleep effort or not? And this is where we roll back and look at our intention. What is the intention underneath the intervention? What is driving the effort? Is it to produce sleep? Or is it something you truly enjoy? Sometimes a sleep effort is simply self-care. Is it something you would do if you didn't have insomnia? Is it something you did before you had insomnia? Would you be upset if it didn't, quote, work? These are all questions you can ask to determine if what you're doing is a sleep effort or not. And sometimes there is some mixed intention behind this, meaning, yes, I adore my Epsom salt baths every night, and I would also be quite happy if they led to better sleep, which is perfectly understandable. I still use what could be considered sleep efforts in my life. I have a blackout shade. Sometimes I use a noisemaker. I lock my cats out of the room. But I also know that if I had to go without these things, my body would adapt. I don't feel the same dependence or anxiety about using them that I felt when I had insomnia. They feel far more optional versus an absolute requirement. So all that to say that you don't have to get rid of sleep efforts unless you want to. And your intuition can be an excellent guidance system in terms of letting you know when that time is. So how to wrap up this episode? What is the secret to effortless sleep? The secret to effortless sleep is there is no secret. That is the ultimate secret. Ask any good sleeper what they do to sleep so well, and they simply will not be able to comprehend the question because sleep comes in the flow. The true challenge occurs when the conscious mind starts to interfere with this beautifully unconscious process, which is how I think of insomnia. We move from an effortless orientation with sleep to a fix-it orientation with sleep. We forget that sleep is simple. There's nothing you need to do or be. Thanks for listening today. I'm Beth Kendall, and you've been tuning in to the Mind, Body, Sleep podcast. Be well. Thanks for being here today. If you love what you heard on today's episode, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the podcast. And if you need more support with your sleep, join me in the Mind, Body, Sleep Mentorship. This 3-month one-on-one program will transform your relationship with sleep so you can get back to living the life that you love, free from the fear of not sleeping. Head on over to bethkendall.com for more details. I'll see you next time.